Hi, I'm Alison Klesman. I'm senior editor of Astronomy magazine, and I'm talking today to Jen Milczarski, who is part of the HERA experiment for NASA, one of the HERA missions. Thank you for being with us today, Jen. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for the invite.
I think the best place to start, though, is to kind of talk about how you got involved with the mission, kind of what inspired you or prompted you to sign up.
Yeah, well, I've always been interested in space and space travel. And even back in middle school, my grandpa would take me to a STEM program down at Wayne State University because I grew up in Michigan. And there, it was like a summer school program. So we would build and launch rockets and visit the space or the science center and everything like that during the summer. So I had that for starts, and then all through high school and college, I really excelled in math and science. I did go the healthcare route, but when they sent up the first civilian mission to the International Space Station, I realized like space travel might be a potential for me in the future. So I started really looking into that. All the stars kind of aligned. I was out visiting a friend, met someone who was in aerospace. They showed me the HERA website. I read about it, applied. Um, Several tests, psychological exams, and interview phases later, I was accepted, and that's kind of how I got started with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think space and space flight, yeah, really has expanded to touch so many different areas. Healthcare is one of them, just the commercial industry too. It's changed a lot, really. It's not just, a group of very specialized astronauts anymore.
That is very true.
Yeah, so I think it's great that that again that people from all kinds of areas, get to come together to do that. Can you tell me, a little bit more specifics maybe about the specific mission you were on? So there have been several HERA missions, and there are kind of several ongoing. Just, kind of how many people, what was the duration, your position on the crew, just a few details about it.
Yeah, so I was campaign 6, mission 3. So several before and more that came after. But the HERA missions in general are designed to offer scientific insights into how people can react to the type of isolation, confinement, work-life demands, and the remote conditions that a long duration space travel would consist of. Our crew specifically, and as well as the HERA analog in general, has 4 participants. We have a commander, a flight engineer, and then 2 mission specialists. And I was a mission specialist, so I was one of the ones that did the spacewalks, which were pretty cool.
What kind of training did you get before you went into the habitat then? If you're gonna do, spacewalks or simulated anything like that, you probably need some training for that.
Right. Well, none of us had any training prior to what NASA offered. But, once we were accepted and we moved down to, Houston, the training started several weeks before we entered the habitat, and it mostly consisted of learning all the different devices and systems and programs that we would be utilizing during the mission, and there were a lot of them, so we had a lot of intense training, for the weeks leading up, and we had virtual reality training, augmented reality training, um, just for when we had to do those spacewalks, building rovers, all that sort of stuff. Um, and a fun fact is that the astronauts that are actually going up to space use a lot of these same devices and training programs in order to be able to train for their space missions. So that I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think people think of analogs as kind of space light, or it's not quite the same, but it's neat to see that the same training and kind of the same principles apply.
Right.
So can you talk about the Hera habitat a little bit, just to give people who might not be familiar with the mission, just an idea of what's the basic layout, kind of how much space do you have? How much privacy do you have or not have, I would imagine.
There's not a lot of space and there is not a lot of privacy. So Hera was about 650 square feet. Um, and it's split among 2 floors and then a loft. So the first floor was our workspace. we had a separate little area for our hygiene area, so shower and toilet, which that was the only place we had privacy. It was a shower curtain and a curtain that covered the toilet. Outside of that, we had just the first level, which was our workspace, and then our airlock for our spacewalks. And then we had a little elevator and ladder in the middle, which took up a lot of that 650 square footage. To the second level, which is where it was more of like our hangout, somewhat work area, also our galley where we would make all of our meals, and our workout area. And then the third level was our loft, and that was our sleeping quarters. All of it was like an open concept. The only time that there wasn't a direct view was if you were on the first floor, unless you looked through the ladder or elevator space, there was obviously a floor, so you couldn't see up. But once you were on the second level, you could view all sleeping quarters and everything. So it there was not a lot of privacy.
Which is probably, again, how it is on the space station as well, although HERA is much smaller than the space station, but there still is not a lot of privacy on the space station either, so it's something people especially on deep space missions, I think that's one of the biggest challenges, I would imagine.
It is, and it was also something that they were studying. So as much as we did research for HERA, they were also researching some things with us as well. And one of the things that they were asking about was the lack of privacy, um, did it outweigh having privacy and like less of an open concept floor plan? Because even if it's just a little bit of extra space, the perception made it appear so much larger than it was. So you just take away a wall for your bedroom and you've opened up a whole new open floor plan, and it looks and appears so much bigger than it is. And we thought that having that lack of privacy definitely was outweighing the closed containment that we would have been in.
And again, yeah, that's an important part of the missions. So another part of the mission, I guess, would be since you are so isolated, what kind of communication did you get with the outside world? And I know that you're kind of in a larger structure. Was there any kind of day or night sort of variation? Are you completely enclosed? Do you have no windows? Kind of what's it look like there?
Yes, so we were in isolation, so we had no access to the outside world. We also had no windows or day or night. We did have a cyclic lighting, so mission control would turn the lights on at 7 in the evening, they would dim them, and then at night at 11 p.m., all the lights would go off. If we did need to get around at night, we had a red light, so it didn't obscure our vision. But outside of that, mission control would send us a daily newspaper that kinda told us what was going on in the outside world so we could stay current with events. And we had little TVs upstairs and downstairs that would sometimes show, like, a virtual window, so of either space or when we rendezvoused Mars, it showed Mars and Phobos, and, but other than that, we didn't really have any access to anyone or anything outside of what exactly we were doing.
I feel like that would be the hardest part for me is no windows.
It was strange, but it's like deviation from the norm, right? When you are living it, breathing it, sleeping it, everything, it just becomes your norm. And after a week or two, we didn't even notice.
So what was your day-to-day like? I mean, I know you said you went on spacewalks, but, obviously everyone kind of has specific responsibilities. How structured was that, and what was that like?
Yeah. So our day to day basically kind of mimicked what they would do at the International Space Station. So mission control, like I said, will wake us up at 7 a.m. With lights on and a song from our playlist, which was kind of fun. And then we had about 30 minutes to kind of caffeinate, have breakfast, get ready for the day. We had a lot of devices that we had to don, so we would do that in our 30 minutes. And in the morning, then we would start with our tasks. We had a schedule that everyone followed, and our schedules varied depending on what your role in the mission was and whatnot, and what day it was. And they were all the same tasks. It was just who was doing it that day and at what time. So for example, in the morning, we would have like the various alternating tasks that we'd need to complete. Um, for example, one day, like say I would do hydroponics when I woke up and tend to the lettuce, and then maybe do some data input and then use augmented reality to build a rover, do a quick workout. We worked out for about 30 minutes most days because they also do that at the International Space Station. That would probably be the biggest variant was at the ISS, they work out for several hours a day because of atrophy and everything like that, where ours was a little bit less so that they could kind of study other things since we did have gravity. So that was kind of cool too. But then we would stop for lunch, which we had dehydrated meals. So lunch, all meals actually took a bit of time. You had to pour hot water over it, let it rehydrate. And they were actually pretty delicious. We did go through a lot of hot sauce, so I see why they use that at the International Space Station, but, that was an interesting experience within itself, all the meals. And then in the afternoon, we would have more of, like, similar tasks that we had in the morning or the day before, or whatnot, just depending on who you were and, what your tasks were for that day, but it was still, like, a 5 to 6-hour work period after lunch, and that's when we would usually do, like, spacewalks if we were out rendezvousing at Mars. We also had days where we had to clean the habitat, do our laundry, and so on. So, it just all kind of depended on the day and what your role was that day. Also, we would spend a half a day doing public relations with, different students at schools that were interested in STEM. So that was really cool and interesting. We would either speak directly with if we weren't on a time delay, or we would record videos and send them back and forth with the students. And they really, really enjoyed that. And then we also had a ground links video that came out, which is on YouTube. That was made public for like questions and answers about HERA. So if anyone's interested in watching that, they have it for every mission of every campaign, and that's on YouTube.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think again, NASA, so much of NASA is public outreach, that it's great that you get to do that even during, an active mission essentially, and especially with the time delays, that's kind of cool that they incorporate that in there.
Yeah, they definitely took all of that into consideration, but depending on if there was a time delay or not, it would be real life or recorded.
What about, say, something like, working out or personal time? Obviously, you need some personal time even if you don't have personal space. Was that kind of worked into every day? Did you get any say about kinda when that happened?
Yes and no. Sometimes you had to make your own time, and sometimes it was scheduled in. So for me, my mornings started a little bit later than the rest of the crew. So I would have time in the morning to get ready, do a task or two, and then I had a little bit of a built in break, it seems like, where, say, our commander was just front loaded, had a very long like lunch and then was backloaded towards the end of the day. Um, so our breaks were kind of scheduled by NASA. But sometimes, like after a task or two, if I just needed a minute, because 45 days with 4 people in a very small space can take a toll. But after one of my tasks or something where I was downstairs and everyone was upstairs, I would just kind of take a minute to just kind of breathe, reevaluate, like what all went on for the day and just see where I'm at. Just take a moment for yourself. So we would do that. Also, like on weekends, we had a little bit of downtime. So we would play games, and that really helped bring everyone together again, get morale back up if it was lacking a little bit. We checked in a lot with one another, which I think was a huge, huge bonus for us. We had met with Victor Glover just before we had gone in. He's one of the astronauts that was very nice and agreed to meet with us to give us a few tips and tricks on how to keep a good bond and high morale. And one of the things he said was to journal. So you would often see us journaling in there just to kind of review what our thoughts were, where we were, what had gone on, good and bad, it didn't matter, just an evaluation of the day, week, month in general. And then to check in with each other often because, you pass people at work and you're like, hey, how's it going? And they're like, oh, it's great. Doing good. You? But you're not. So, we really wanted to, and we made a pact early on that we would be very honest with one another. And there were times where we had to kind of hash out just something simple like, hey, you're drinking more coffee than you're allotted. Like, could you cut back on that a little bit? Or like, could we maybe weigh the portions of food because it feels like people are getting more or less kind of thing. Just it's when you're confined and you don't have a lot of distractions, all these little things start to matter. So that was an interesting thing to realize when distractions are gone, what really matters. So we would have to talk about that once in a while. But I mean, we got along fantastic and I mean, we still keep in contact. And even after we were like, oh my God, what do we do now? We have to all go to our own hotel rooms? Like this is weird.
Well, I mean, I think that's great. I mean, I think mental health is so important for these long duration missions, maybe almost more important than physical health in some aspects. And kind of be there for each other is going to be a big part of it. That's really nice to see.
Well, and also on that note, we were in constant contact with a psychiatrist who also works with all the astronauts who go to space. So she had a really good insight to as to what to expect and how to kind of redirect our thoughts if we were kind of going down like a rough patch, and just talk about it with us and get us to be a little bit more, like, mentally well. I don't think we personally struggled with that as much as other campaigns, but, it was really nice to know that she was there in case that were to happen, or if we even thought that we might be kind of getting a little caught up in the moment, so that was really nice, and also we had a medical doctor just in case anything medically were to go wrong, and they checked in with us every week.
I guess, did this change your kind of thoughts on long duration space flight? Did you kind of get what you expected and say, "Okay, this is what I assumed would happen," or, did anything really change your outlook on that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think I may have been a little naive to long-term space travel, because I didn't really comprehend how much could go wrong. And for example, to go out to Mars, it would be about 7 months one way. And then you're there doing whatever mission for however long of duration, and then a 7-month trip back, and you're talking food shortages, water shortages, any medical condition that could happen, um, just confinement and the toll that that takes mentally. Uh, Another interesting thing, I wear contacts, and one of the, um, areas that was kinda overlooked was, we climb on ladders and your hands touch everything that your shoe touches and that whatever, your hands touch it, right? And then you touch your eye. So I was like, "Can I bring antibiotic eye drops?" Well, no other mission had been able to bring it, so they were like, "Um, we never actually thought about that." So there was, like, small things that we learned along the way that I too, in regard to this question, was like, "Actually, that's a really good point. What if they had, like, an eye infection or say they had, like, appendicitis? Like, how would you cure that?" Normally, you have to have your appendix out or some high, uh, strength antibiotics to kinda help with that. So while we were in there, we were starting to think of different ways that the astronauts could be safe going that far for that long. And also, is it worth having a little bit less privacy in order to have more forms of entertainment? So a TV or some games or some electronic device that you could stream something on, or just any sort of entertainment that would keep you sane while you're going all the way out for 7 months. I mean, if you sat in your living room for 7 months, you'd kinda get bored, so Is it worth losing a little bit of privacy, a little bit of that weight for the vessel in order to have a little bit more entertainment? All different things that I didn't ever think about or consider. But when you're living it, you're like, oh, yes, this could change. This could be different. You need more of this. You need less of that. And it really comes down to like the basic survival needs of life, like food, water, a little bit of entertainment, and like a place to sleep. And outside of that, I mean, you don't really need much.
But again, I think, it's kind of my last big question, but you've mostly answered it, which is, these missions are really telling us what we haven't thought of yet, when we're going to send people on these long duration missions. What do we need? Because yeah, you pull someone aside on the street, who's not thinking about it, and they're like, "Well, you need food, water, a place to sleep, and, that's it." But that's not it, especially if you're basically working, for 7 months straight with nowhere to go. How do you stay sane? How do you, get along for that long in an enclosed space? So I think, yeah, it's really teaching us a lot about these things, and it's kind of, I guess to me, it seems like a good way to do it with, I mean, yes, you can do this on the International Space Station and they're doing it, but, that one data point is not enough. This is a great way to do it without spending all the money to get into loft tons of people into orbit.
I mean, the astronauts have so many tasks that they're already taking on that they also don't need to be the guinea pig for everything. So it's nice to be able to find astronaut-like candidates in order to do different analogs such as HERA. There's also a CHAPEA analog that they just picked off. I think it was 2 years ago. And that's for more of like a living on Mars type situation, and it's pretty cool. It's a 3D printed habitat, and it's like the burnt orange red and everything like that. So not only do they have the analog for going out to Mars, but now they have one for actually like having life on Mars. So it's pretty cool.
Right, yeah, I think that's great. I guess just to close it out, is there anything I haven't asked you that you really would like to say, or, some experience that you really wanna share? It's okay if not, but I kind of always like to give you that opportunity to say something if I didn't give you the chance to answer a question you really wanted to answer.
I think we covered most topics. I don't know. I personally loved it. At the end, I think it was day 44, and we were getting ready to kind of like leave on day 45, or come out of the habitat on day 45. And we were all sitting around kind of thinking about how much longer we could actually stay in there, provided we have food and everything like that. And I think the general consensus was at least another 6 months. So I have faith that everyone would make it out to Mars, like doing well mentally and hopefully physically. But that was an interesting point of view that I didn't think we would really be able to stay in there for that long. But that just goes to show how good of time we were having. And time started flying by, at least once we rendezvoused Mars. Um, but all in all, like, if anyone is interested in partaking in one of these analogs, I personally had a fantastic experience. It's opened so many doors outside of this, that have just taken me down very cool avenues, and it's inspiring, not only are you learning the different ways that astronauts are training and, like, for example, all the different situations and things that you didn't think of for long-term space travel, and all of that kind of stuff. But you also are helping future astronauts get there safely, and that is huge in the space world, because we want to explore Mars and we want to have more lunar missions and whatnot. So I think that anyone who's interested in this should just apply, just give it a go. The worst they could say is no. So you might as well just apply if you like it. And like I said, there's HERA, which is like the space travel, and then there's CHAPEA, which is more like life on Mars. So there's different types of analogs. There's also sleep studies that they do and whatnot. So I would just say go for it. And I had a great experience. I'm sure everyone else will have a great experience. And I think it'll help the world of space astronomically, no pun intended, because it really is it just provides so much data for all parties included.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for your contribution to science and for your time with us here today. We really appreciate it.
Anytime. I appreciate you guys asking me to come out.
Well, that should be it for us today. As far as that goes, we are done here, but make sure you guys stay tuned for more great content. Thank you.